America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker with the Job Creators Network, and today we're joined by Emily Sturge. She is a campus reform reporter, which is part of the Leadership Institute. Emily, thanks so much for joining us.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, you speak out a lot on college campuses and kind of the indoctrination that we see with younger people. I have two daughters who are right around your age. One's graduated, one is finishing up her senior year in Florida. And what she tells me, I kind of, laugh. My younger daughter, she is on the quiet side. She's not politically outspoken. Inside, she's a conservative, but she doesn't want to share it with anybody. It's her business. Your business is your business. And she votes the way she votes. And that's it. She even registers as an independent in the state of Florida so that nobody can know what she votes. So she takes her stand, but it's a personal stand. And she's very clear about that. But she told me a story recently. She's at UCF and she is taking social entrepreneurship. So when you hear the title of that class, don't you think social media?
I certainly do.
It's not. It is entrepreneurship to solve social issues.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, it's just been interesting. She said some kids came in yesterday or the day before yesterday or last week and said, it's so hard to, you can't find a job. This is the worst employment market ever. And she said she was really glad to see the professor be factual. And he said, well, do you know what the unemployment rate is? And they said, no. Well, do you know what it is compared to 10 years ago? No. Well, actually, if you compare it to 10 years ago, this is a much better employment situation for new grads. And she said, Mom, I was really glad to hear him be factual instead of, like she said, I don't need a professor to go either way in the class. I'd rather them be factual. So I'm just curious what you see, because I don't think college students are really learning American values on college campuses. And I feel like even saying the words American values is seen as bad or racist even.
Absolutely. I mean, we have reported that those anti-American ideas are so pervasive in the classroom. I want to go back. Your daughter's mindset is extremely healthy. I'm very proud of any young conservative who can be firm in their values and stay true to themselves, stay true to American values, even as they have to withstand sometimes attacks in the classroom, verbal attacks from peers. I think discussion, debate in the classroom is extremely healthy, but that's something that our higher education system has been really, really lacking. Our higher education system has been acting as this ideological echo chamber in many classrooms that I have experienced, where a leftist professor uses their position of power essentially as a soapbox in order to push leftist ideas. And unfortunately, in some of my classes, I saw students nod their head like robots, and nobody said anything. There was no discussion, there was no debate. And so I think at the end of the day, that's what we need to bring back to the classroom, is we need to bring back that discussion. Your daughter should be empowered to talk about her views in the classroom, and her peers should also be able to talk about their views. There should be room for healthy conversation there. Now, the sentiment about the unemployment rates, what we're hearing at the Leadership Institute's Campus Reform, we're actually reporting that 1 in 4 Gen Z workers say that they regret going to college at all. It's a really jarring statistic, but the reason why the reason that we are seeing that is because college degrees are failing to prepare many young people for their careers or for society. And we've reported a statistic that 72% of college graduates say that their degree, in fact, didn't prepare them for the workforce at all. And the reason why is exactly because of the sort of classes that they offer. Your daughter's social entrepreneurship classes that have become so rooted in leftist ideas, social justice values, pushing DEI in the classroom. Students are graduating. They know how to protest. They know how to go to anti-Israel protests. They know they're well versed in diversity, equity, and inclusion. But many Gen Zers are saying that when they're applying to jobs, when they're going to job interviews, when they're entering the workforce, they just don't have the skills that they think are necessary to get them those jobs, to prepare them for their first day on the job. So I think that's certainly an issue that we can solve in our classrooms. And I think with the new administration in office, as we've seen both federal and state action, removing some of the ideological ideas that were so pervasive in our classrooms, as we remove those ideological ideas, remove political ideology from the classrooms, it seems like our education system is getting back into academic rigor, which is what is going to prepare young people for both the workforce and society.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And we have heard a lot about DEI initiatives, and what I've read about it, and maybe I'm wrong in what I've read, and it's not my belief, but it's what I've read to try to understand sort of the premise of DEI. Is it an outgrowth of what affirmative action used to be? And what I understand the proponent or the supporters of DEI, the original DEI idea, is that they say, well, it's been commandeered by the left, but it had original good intentions. I'm not sure that a lot of people agree with that. What are your thoughts?
I think the bottom line issue here, and the issue that most people have, is that standards were replaced with skin color. Meritocracy was replaced with racial quotas. DEI has continued affirmative action. In fact, it's acted as sort of a backdoor. In 2023, we saw the Supreme Court struck down affirmative action. But what that ruling told campuses, what it told universities, is they can't explicitly ask applicants when they're submitting their college applications, they can't ask them to tick a box with their race and then use that to discriminate against them. But it left this massive door open to universities asking students in essay prompts and personal statements about questions like, how has your race shaped your life? Or what does your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion look like? And those are, they're worded in a very left-leaning way. We saw after that Supreme Court ruling, Harvard University, Johns Hopkins, Rice University, just for example, these elite institutions putting those very left-leaning questions on applications, sort of to continue affirmative action. And the fear among students that I've heard is that many of them feel that if they answer incorrectly, deemed by leftist standards, or if they don't answer at all, they fear that their application could be heading straight for the shredder. So many Gen Zers resort to really either playing up this answer, maybe even lying on an application about their so-called commitment to this leftist idea just because they believe that it's necessary and they don't want to hurt their chances. That's not how our admissions offices should be working. That's not how our applications should be working. I mean, students should be judged based on their talents, their qualification, their skills, and certainly not any commitment to political ideology. So that is still happening. We have seen this administration make some positive strides toward restoring transparency in our admissions processes. Recently, President Trump signed an executive action to bring back transparency and require colleges to report admissions data to make sure that the affirmative action practices aren't taking place in admissions offices. Unfortunately, they are right now, but hopefully we will see some positive change over time.
You said that 1 in 4 Gen Z workers regret going to college. There's also a large amount of them who are probably carrying student debt. And I'm assuming that they're not getting the jobs to pay that debt back. There's about $1.8 trillion out there in outstanding student loans. We've got universities and colleges that are sitting on nearly $900 billion in untaxed endowments. Under the Biden administration, there was an attempt to forgive student loans, and Job Creators Network actually was one of the 2 lawsuits that went to the Supreme Court on this issue, and the Supreme Court overruled it. Biden didn't actually follow that ruling, and he found workarounds. But what is the solution on the student debt? Because our perspective at JCN was that the real villain here are these colleges and universities that are selling these students, and they are selling these students worthless degrees. I'm just going to say it, worthless degrees that are not marketable, that don't give them hard skills and prepare them for jobs out in the real world. I mean, when I went to orientation with my older daughter, she was taking prerequisite college degree program to go to nursing school. And so, but we were lumped with many other colleges, and they went around the room and basically said, my degree is going to be in environmental science. My degree is going to be in, whatever, gender studies. My goal in life is going to be to get rid of plastic straws. And my jaw dropped because those are not marketable skills. My follow-up question to them is, okay, where do you see yourself getting a job? Like, what is your job going to be? And I just don't think anybody's making those connections. But what is the solution on the college lending process? Where colleges have no skin in the game.
You're absolutely right. We are seeing universities sell these degrees filled with ideology instead of real world skills to students. And let's be real, it's Wall Street prices. It's sometimes 6 figures to attain these degrees. In addition to that, it's an investment of 4 years of time, of energy, of money. So it's a massive investment into a student's life and their pocketbook. For so long, we as a society have looked at college as this sort of rite of passage, and students feel that they need to go immediately after high school and that there's no other way around it. And so a couple things here. As students are looking into where to go to college, as they're deciding what degree they want to pursue, I recommend that the solution there is to look at the dollar amount and then also how much money you could potentially be making in a career in that field. You shouldn't just be going to school for a degree that you don't expect is going to result in a long-term career if that's your goal, is to pay off those student loans. And so at Campus Reform, we've come out with an analysis looking at the return on investment of degrees. And it's exactly what you would expect. Degrees in things like business and finance, science, technology, mathematics, those degrees, of course, end up those students end up with well-paying jobs. And in many cases, they're able to pay off those student loans because they have well-paying jobs. But degrees in things like the social sciences and English tend to have lower returns on investment. Now, I'm not saying you can't get a job with those degrees, but it is a lower return on investment. And in many cases, that's because those are specifically the degrees in college of, liberal arts colleges, where those degrees are just filled with social justice. They're filled with ideological standards, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And oftentimes, those are not skills that you can take to the workforce, whereas a degree in science or technology, mathematics, finance, you can take those skills to the workforce. So the bottom line is, I recommend that students before they decide where they're going to school, before they decide which degree to pursue, they need to decide what marketable skills they want and how that's going to help them get a job one day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And there's also, there's also decisions to be made. I know in the Big Beautiful Bill, there was a limitation on the parent loans that can be taken. To me, it's still a big number. I think it's a limit of $100,000. And so, there were decisions, in my family, when we looked at colleges, it was an in-state, the choice was in-state, period, end of story. It was about, if you want to go out of state, then you're going to have to take student loans and pay the difference. It wasn't an option for our family. And my kids made the decision based on that. They didn't want to carry debt. And that was what I told them, was that my parents gave me the greatest gift they could give me. And that was to graduate debt free. Very generous. I'm very lucky. I don't discount that. But I also made decisions that made college less expensive. And I worked all the way through. So those are decisions that I think families have to make. It's become this situation where, people just, the spigot is on. There's no lending process. It's just, if you want to get a student loan, you get it. There's no other avenue that an 18-year-old could sign up for $50,000 loan with no credit, no experience, no way to pay it back. And no measurement of, if I get this degree, I'll get a job making this much money. And so once the banks were taken out of this process, it's just an open spigot. And I just think, how do we get the banks back into the process? How do we take the federal loans out of the federal government? They're not supposed to be giving loans anyway.
That's a fantastic question. And I know many companies have turned to privatizing the student loan system. And I personally, I connect to your daughter's story. I'm a Floridian too. We have a fantastic system. We have Florida Bright Futures, a scholarship system. If you have a very high GPA, if you do the volunteer work, you qualify for scholarships paid for by the Florida Lottery. And I'm sure you have very smart daughters. I'm sure that they benefited from this program too. I certainly did. But I had to make the choice. When I was 18 years old, when I was applying to colleges, I got into many out-of-state universities. I dreamt going out of state. I dreamt coming up here to Washington, D.C. for my undergraduate degree, but it didn't make financial sense. And I had to make the logical decision of staying in state, going to the University of Florida, a public institution, and going where I knew I had scholarship money because of my academics, rather than coming up here to a school that maybe is $60,000 a year. I knew I would have to take out student loans, so I made the logical financial decision. And for students like me, or students like your daughters, it pains us when we hear our peers saying that they are going to get these very expensive degrees and just expect the government to pay them back. I heard my peers saying that when Biden was quote unquote canceling student loans. I had peers who said, oh, I'm going to go get a master's degree in gender studies. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do that. And it'll just be canceled. And so it pained students like me who turned down fantastic opportunities to make those logical financial decisions. And at the end of the day, we need to be holding institutions accountable for providing value in the degrees that they are selling to young people. Young people are spending so much money, so much time on their degrees, and colleges need to be delivering on that. This administration has done a fantastic job of really making sure that colleges are removing ideology from the classroom and getting back to real world academics. And one of the ways that they're doing that is telling universities that, look, your federal funding, you're risking it if you are continuing to push this ideology on students. That's exactly what needed to happen, because as we've seen colleges remove some of the ideology from the classroom, like I mentioned earlier, we're getting back to academic rigor. Hopefully we'll see degrees become valuable again in the minds of Gen Zers. And the way to do that is to teach real world issues, real world ideas, marketable skills in the classroom, so that students have something to take to the workforce, and then they feel that the value of their degree was worth it.
We represent small business issues, lower taxes. We focus on lower taxes, less regulations, pro-growth policies, The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, game changer for our small business owners, the big, beautiful bill, fantastic to have all those lower tax rates locked in. The no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, by a wide margin, more than 2/3 of our we poll small business owners. So more than 2/3 of our small business owners say that they believe it'll make it easier to find workers with policies like that in place. And that's important. But going back to that story that I told you, that unemployment rate now is so hard for students coming out in my daughter's classroom. The teacher said, "Do you know what the unemployment rate is?" There's over 1 million jobs available right now that are going unfilled because we have a skills mismatch. We don't have a jobs problem. We have a skills problem. And so going to college may not be the right avenue for some kids anyway. I always joke that in my next life, I'm going to come back as like a plumber, because if you probably haven't hired a plumber yet, but they literally can charge any price they want, because there's not enough of them. So, there's over 1 million jobs out there. Unemployment rate is, low. It's lower than it was 10 years ago, according to her professor. How do we get these students to sort of take a moment and maybe not everybody's supposed to go to college, and take a step back and say, maybe there's a skill or a trade I can learn, or maybe I want to be a stylist and open my own salon and be an entrepreneur. What do you think about all that?
Such a fantastic point. Just a couple years ago, we were reporting at Campus Reform that there was a labor shortage of 10 million jobs among the blue-collar workers. And now we're actually seeing Gen Z turn the tide on that. We are witnessing Gen Z really embrace independence, the entrepreneurial spirit, and look at other avenues other than that traditional four-year degree. Specifically, we've seen a lot of young men turn to the trade sector, turn to blue-collar work, electricians, mechanics, HVAC technicians, plumbers, like you mentioned. But another really exciting thing, when I think of trades, when I think of blue-collar work, I think of young men specifically, but this is also happening among young women. I think of young women that I graduated high school with. I see so many of them turning to opening maybe their own salons, maybe becoming makeup artists, maybe becoming a realtor, a baker, opening up their own place, opening up their own boutique, even using social media to act as a full-time income. There are so many other avenues in this day and age, especially with artificial intelligence and social media, with the internet. There are so many other ways for Gen Zers to really create jobs for themselves and not be so dependent on that four-year degree. So that's absolutely a trend that we're seeing. And once again, I encourage students who are maybe high school seniors who are deciding, is college right for me? There are many avenues to take. I fully stand by. I believe there's great value in a degree. I believe there's great value in getting a college experience and experiencing a classroom with people that maybe don't have the same opinions as you, and experiencing that discussion and debate. But as we've seen that decline on college campuses, we are seeing many Gen Zers look to other pathways and really prove that they can be successful without that traditional four-year degree.
Yeah, I have a small business owner in North Carolina. You mentioned HVAC, and he was having trouble finding workers who were skilled in HVAC. And so what he was finding was that it was going back to the high school. Like, we needed to catch them at the high school level, and before they went to college and took on loans for potentially a degree that they weren't meant for, or that college wasn't meant for them. And so he created his own charter schools. So here's a guy who's running like an HVAC company, creates his own charter schools. They're successful, and it's a feeder into his company, as well as others, of course, but it ends up being a feeder into his company. He employs like 1,000 people. So, I mean, he needs a lot of workers, but it gives them hard skills. And so he's reaching them before the colleges do. And I just think that's the entrepreneur spirit. That's our small business owners, and what they do is they small business owners, entrepreneurs, They see a problem and they figure out how to come up with their own solution and solve their problem. He had a labor problem. He decided to educate them himself and create his own curriculum. And now he literally has high schools, multiple high schools around the state, and he's growing them as we speak right now.
That is certainly the American mindset, the beauty of free markets, the beauty of capitalism right there, having opportunities, having freedom to make choices. And I really am excited to see so many of my peers take on different avenues. But as there's this increased competition and Gen Zers realize that they have so many different pathways that they can choose one of them, they don't have to go to college as a rite of passage. I think we're going to see colleges really step up their game because they're going to be losing money by having fewer applicants and then having fewer ultimately students pay 6 figures for a degree as more students realize that maybe that degree just isn't worth it anymore. So I think that we will hopefully see colleges step up their game in the classroom, bring back some real skills, marketable skills to our classrooms, instead of using our classrooms as soapboxes to push leftist ideology or to encourage students basically to use their campus as an activist playground. We reported at Campus Reform from the beginning of the attacks from Israel on Hamas. We reported the beginning of those anti-Israel protests. They took over college campuses for multiple years. University administrations let the chaos run rampant on campus. Some universities like Columbia, Harvard, those elite institutions failed to put a stop to it. And we really saw America's college campuses look more like activist playgrounds than real world institutions that were teaching the next generation of students. And think about America's classrooms right now. There are students in K through 12 in higher education who they're going to be future CEOs. They're going to be future doctors, lawyers, business owners, even senators, politicians, presidents sitting in our classrooms. And so we need to mold the next generation to really have great skills that they can bring to society, bring to the workforce, bring to their personal lives so that they can be successful individuals. But for so long, we instead saw campuses really cater to political ideology. I do think we're seeing a reverse in that trend, though.
I do too. And I hope that the Trump administration has enough time to make some permanent inroads that can be built upon, because a 4-year term sometimes just isn't long enough, right?
Well, I think we've seen incredible momentum. It's, I believe, been 7 months at this point, and we have seen, it feels like it's been 7 years, because just being a higher education reporter, I'm reporting every single day on a new development, whether it is this administration looking into, one of the latest things was foreign funding, admissions data. We've also seen this administration launch hundreds of investigations into discriminatory practices in hiring and admissions offices using race instead of merits or skills or qualifications to judge both students or potential employees. Then on the other side, we've seen this administration launch investigations into the way colleges handled anti-Semitism. We've seen investigations into women's sports. And for so long, schools were allowing men to compete on women's teams. And then we saw the University of Pennsylvania had to apologize to every single female swimmer who was impacted by that. And that's just been in just a few months of this administration. I think we have a lot more time. And I think we've certainly witnessed a turning point in the education system where meritocracy is really coming back. Transparency is coming back. And at the end of the day, I love to drive that point home. This is about the students, their skills, their talents, their academic ability. And for so long in our society, we were witnessing the decline of academic ability as standards were lowered in the education system, especially around COVID, when we saw online learning and relaxed standards. Tests no longer were in the classroom. Tests were at home online when you could use Google. And so we really saw a decline in academic ability among many students with those lowered standards. And now it seems like we are getting back to normalcy. We are getting back to meritocracy.
I think you're right. I hope you're right. And I hope it sticks, because I do like the direction, and I do like that people feel more comfortable speaking out and sharing their opinions without getting attacked for their opinions. A friend of mine's daughter is unfortunately really been indoctrinated through school. And, when it came to I'm a previous competitive swimmer. And so I really understand, like with Riley Gaines, how much work goes into competition swimming. And so to see men competing in those sports, I felt it. There was just, it's unbelievable that anyone would think that that's okay. And so my friend's daughter, who is not athletic, does not participate in athletics in any way. She's just, some of us are built to be athletic and some of us aren't. She's super smart in school, though. Academically, she's off the charts. So she really couldn't relate to that, but she supported if somebody identified as a woman and they wanted to swim, they should be able to swim. And her response was that she was asked about fairness, was that, well, those women should train harder. I had to walk away from the conversation, because that's not the issue at all. And so I heard Riley Gaines speak one time, and I think what she did and her courage in standing up in that issue was incredible. So I'm really glad to see people like Riley, people like yourself speaking out on these issues. Thank you so much for what you're doing and your courage for doing it, because I do understand how much courage it takes to do something like that. Can you tell everybody how they can learn more about you at Campus Reform?
Absolutely. So I'm reporting stories every single day at campusreform.org. But another great thing we do is we come out with video content on YouTube. And recently, in one of our YouTube videos, I had the opportunity to speak to a high school athlete in Oregon. She's a young track and field athlete. She recently experienced having a male compete against her, and she actually decided to step off the podium. She won a medal. He won a medal. She decided to take a step off the podium as a form of silent protest to show that she just wasn't okay with him competing against her. And now her medal was taken away from her. And so she is fighting. She's in a legal battle for her First Amendment rights. So when we think of the women's sports issue, we think of Title IX most of the time to protect women, but also it comes down to free speech too. And in that instance, her name is Alexa Anderson. Alexa had her free speech rights taken away from her that day. So this women's sports issue really pervades so many different fronts. And we are coming out with video content where I actually get to speak to female athletes like her. I get to hear their perspective. I got to talk to her attorney to talk about the legal ramifications of this battle. But we are on the pulse of the issues in the higher education system, and we are reporting 24/7 on them.
Well, I love what you're doing. Emily, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. And thank you all for taking the time to tune in. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast from, and we'll be back soon with another episode.